Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lori Clark Show. This episode of my podcast is brought to you with the help of Zoom Us, a video and audio conferencing interface. It's important to know that I'm in no way sponsored by Zoom. I just want to tell you how much I love it. It is very reliable, easy to use, and provides excellent audio and video files that my team and I produce to share the power of story with you. Another non-sponsored, couldn't do without, but just have to tell you how good it is Squarespace. When they say it is the all-in-one platform, it really is true. I go into the back end of my website multiple times a day, adjust things, post podcast, add links, and look at our show's analytics, which all sync across my devices. And when I need an image, Squarespace provides an excellent resource that's powered by Unsplash. Now for my most favorite feature, the Squarespace app. Being a working mom, there never seems to be enough time in my day. So when my daughter's in ballet, I sit in my car and upload, post, and manage everything on my website from the app. It's really cool and seamless. Squarespace is really, really simple and very dedicated to helping me create a brand of excellence. So with that, big shout out to Zoom, Squarespace, and Unsplash. Thank you for helping me tell people's stories. With that said, let's move on to the best part about today, the show. Please allow me to welcome my next guest on The Lori Clark Show. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. I am very excited to hear about your journey with type 1 diabetes. So you said that you were diagnosed 2 years ago. So that would have made you 17, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So what happened?
So the story's a long one.
I got all night.
It's pretty complex and it's super unique. I was getting a routine physical. As an athlete, they kind of require physicals every year. I played in the spring as a baseball player, so I went in for a physical in about September. And for the first time ever, the doctor recommended I get blood work just to see. I'm a super healthy person, and I've never had any issues. My doctor used to call me the epitome of health. He would just send me all my way, and everything would be okay. But he wanted a blood work sample for this time around. So I was getting it on Saturday morning. And the night before, I was at a rehearsal dinner for one of my cousins. I was doing a reading at the wedding the next day, and I was at a rehearsal dinner with my dad. And the waiter brings out all this cake, probably 3 or 4 different flavors, and he sets it down on a tray. And I'm sitting there with my uncle and my dad, and we got to figure out, which piece of cake is the best. There are all these different flavors. We got to figure out which one is going to be the one that we got to tell people, you got to try that one.
Sure.
So of course I'm going through and I'm just ripping through all this cake. And
all right, what kind of cake was there? Because I would like to know which one.
I think it was red velvet was the leader there.
All right.
But I ate right up until the fasting point because obviously before you get blood work drawn, you got to fast for the X amount of hours. And my mom wasn't with me, so I was with my dad, and he was the one that kind of said, let's cut it off here. So right up to the deadline. So the next morning I go and I get the blood work, and everything came back perfectly fine, except for that my blood sugar was slightly above average, like 145, and the average is typically 80 to 120. So it wasn't alarming. It wasn't that concerning. It was just higher, So we kind of came back to the drawing board and said, well, of course, I was just ripping through cake the night before. Like, it's probably no big deal. And they agreed. They said it should be okay. We'll get a couple more tests and we'll see what happens. So for the next 2 months, I probably got 3 other tests. I took a sugar test where I had to drink something, stay stagnant, and they tested me after that. And then I was just going through things, and I didn't know what they were looking for. I didn't ask questions. I just abided, and whatever it was going to be, it was going to be. So I went to work out one day, and my dad beat me to my gym. And he said, you're not working out today. We got something to talk about. So he pulled me aside, and it was kind of rare. The first thought that popped into my head was that somebody passed away in my family. And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, where's this going to go? So he takes me outside and he told me, he said, the doctors think you're type 1 diabetic and we're going to go down to see your doctor and we're going to try to figure out what's going on. He kind of started to get emotional about it because he, I think, was kind of ignorant to what it actually is.
Right.
So the first thought in my head was, thank God nobody died.
Right.
It's all good here. And when he started to get emotional, I kind of started to realize like I'd have to lock it in and kind of be there for him, you know, because I knew that it wasn't my fault. I knew all the parameters. I kind of understood what it was about. So I kind of handled it, said okay, no big deal. We'll keep going. So I came back inside. I grabbed my stuff. My trainer's a type 1 as well, which is just convenient, I guess.
Wow.
So we went down to my doctor's and he drew my blood again, and it came back at like 87, and that is exactly in range. No concern there. So he looks at me and he goes, you know what? I'm supposed to tell you that you're a type 1, but I'm not actually sure that you are. So he called down to the hospital and he said, look, you know, we're supposed to admit him tonight, but what do we do? Because everything's normal. He's got no symptoms. He's acting perfectly fine. You know, what do we do? So they said he has beta cells that will kill his pancreas eventually. So while he's not showing as a type 1 right now, he will be one day.
Wow.
So at that, they said, come down, we'll teach you how to manage it, and we're going to have to handle it from this point forward. So I did that. I went down, I spent the night, and they fed me everything that they could. It was basically an experiment. And they tested my blood sugar for every 3 hours and all the rest all through the night. And I came back just in normal range, and they hadn't really ever seen anything like that because they knew my pancreas was going to be affected. And they knew I was going to be a type 1, but I wasn't showing it consistently. So it was a super, super rare case. Wow. And what it came down to was I was basically in a pre-diabetic state. So they pretty much caught it within maybe 2 weeks of it actually starting, which was miraculous within itself. So for the first 6 months, my treatment was very different than a lot of people.
Okay.
I didn't go through the traumas and the terrors of
right.
What a lot of people go through. And over the next 6 months, I was good. And then it started to slow down a little bit. My own production started to slow down. And then I kind of had to handle it and adjust on the fly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you see that? Did you see that as a gift, or did you see that, you know, catching it early?
It was super fortunate. I mean, like I said, I've heard horrible stories about what people have gone through with weight loss and comas and all those kind of things. A blessing in disguise, I would probably call it. I think it was the best case scenario for what I was going through. Nobody in my family has it, so it was a surprise to all of us. It taught me a lot. I had to mature quick. I went through a phase, you know, obviously when you're in the hospital and you're staying overnight, you know, my parents have all these thoughts and all these concerns. And for once, probably for the first time, I kind of had to sit there and I had to be their rock. Like I said, you know, I had to inject myself for the first time. I had to go through all these things. And I'll never forget the looks on their face when they had to watch me do that and they saw that. But I was at a point such late in my life that they let me handle it on my own. And I think that's been vital too, because there are a lot of diabetics I know that go through routines based on what their parents think or based on what doctors think, and they get to an older age and they can't handle it as well.
Right.
So at least I lived with it for so much time where I could adjust kind of easily and be on my own, because I was going to school, I was going to college within a year.
Right. So you kind of thought to yourself, I have to know this. I can't use someone else's wisdom on this. If I'm going away, then I need to know how to do this for myself.
Yes, everything. And, you know, I never got annoyed when people asked me questions about it. You know, my parents would kind of check in on me and make sure everything was okay. Yeah. But they didn't feel like they had to, because I was so calm about it and I was so emotionless about it that I kind of had it's going to be what it's going to be. It's not my fault. You know, I can't regret anything. It just is what it is.
Yeah. And the thing is, it isn't your fault. It's just the body is doing, well, they don't really know why it happens either, do they? No. And it stinks because diabetes and being a diabetic, it's such an ugly word. It has such an ugly connotation with a lot of people. And there are always the questions that come down to, you know, you don't look like you're a diabetic. You don't, you know, act like it. You know, what can you eat? What can you eat? There are just so many questions that people have. And it's out of ignorance, but it's not very ignorance. It's mostly just a misunderstanding, I think it is.
And I had to go into an athletic season because it was my senior year of high school.
Right.
So I had committed to a college to play there. I had gone through, so much of my life.
Yeah.
I had to take this first off season as a whole new perspective.
Oh, I can imagine, right? Like
yeah.
That would have been, and you have a different layer because you're a high level athlete.
Exactly.
I've done 2 shows on type 1 diabetes. I talked with Nathan. He was diagnosed at 20. Now I want to get this right. I think it was 21 or 22. And he just said it was life-changing for him. And he kind of had the same experience that you had, where his perspective was, I'm alive. Like I can't be worrying about the shame or the guilt of this or what people think. Like, I'm alive. And then I interviewed a woman whose son was diagnosed when he was 18 months. And that's a whole other crazy nightmare, because she was the one that was, she was learning herself and laying awake at night and watching him, making sure all his sugar levels were right. And so how do you handle, like, you're my third guest that's in between those two. So how do you handle like the sugar spikes and all of that kind of thing?
So as an athlete for so long, I always trained super hard.
Yeah.
And with that comes, a desire to gain weight, a desire to gain muscle, all this other stuff. So I'd always counted my calories. I'd always counted my carbs. I'd always counted my protein all through high school. And it wasn't a self-conscious thing. It wasn't a self-image thing. It was just how do I get more productive in training?
Right.
Based on what I eat. So my transition to counting carbs and my transition to doing things I had to do with diabetes wasn't a transition. I'd already done it for so long, where I understood that this amount of portion of this amount of food was this amount of carbs, and I could handle that. So when I had to learn how to kind of count carbs and treat myself, I understood it to a level that I think most people, no matter when they're diagnosed, don't really understand. So I met with 6 or 7 nutritionists, and I went all through this stuff, and they were asking me questions instead of me asking them questions, because I kind of learned so much through what I had done for so long. So to manage all that stuff is not that challenging sometimes, which I'm blessed to say, of course, but it's never easy, based on the intensity of workout, based on habit, based on routine. All that stuff changes throughout the year, and, road trips when we play in the spring. So there are always aspects of it that are challenging, but I feel confident in myself because I had done it for so long, kind of that transition didn't bother me that much.
But that's where people have the trouble, because it's saying, okay, well, how do I adjust the carb and the protein? And then there's actual formulas that you have to put into place. And it's this, not only are you dealing with the emotional, but you're also dealing with the reality of, okay, well, I didn't really do well in math, so now I got to learn all this stuff, right? Like, it is a lot. I know you say you were really rock solid, but was there an aspect for you that you felt like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the rest of my life?
Yeah, there were a couple. When I went to school and played ball down there, I was in a pretty tough scenario. They made a coaching change my first year, and they ran us up a little bit. They had a lot of physical workouts that we did. So I was super self-conscious about kind of what I ate, in the sense that I had to manage what I was doing for something that was super intense very frequently. We did a lot of long distance running, a lot of uncomfortable things that diabetics typically don't do. When they have fundraising events, they don't run 5Ks, they do walk runs, because the majority of people have to walk,
Yeah.
So I had to plan for all these things, and I found some patterns in what I was doing that, like, I lost about 12 pounds when I went to school. Because it was like the schedule didn't work, and I had to change this, and I didn't want to eat too much, but also not enough. And so there were just periods of time for probably 7, 8 hours a day between breakfast and a late lunch that you just didn't eat as an athlete. And that's tough. When we went on road trips in the spring, conversely, there's more downtime. So what I had been doing for the winter and the fall of the strenuous workouts, I kept on doing in the spring.
Right.
But more downtime, your blood sugar levels go higher. So there's just changes that you kind of have to realize seasonally and with your activity and all the other things. So I've had stretches where I've gone like, what is going on right now? Like, what's up with this pattern? How do I change this? How do I figure it out? But I've never hit it. I've never not asked questions. I've never, try to figure it out on my own. I always try to be proactive about a lot of things.
I have a question for you. I have a question. So when you were talking about, the running, you're running 5K and doing all that. So lots of people with type 1 aren't doing that.
Right.
But what if they want to? Like if people are listening right now and they're going, okay, if he can do it, then with the help of my doctor and the help of the person that I consult with, maybe we can work this out. But what were you doing that could get you to run 5K?
So it's funny because I just did it about 2 weeks ago again. We had these long workouts here to wrap up our fall. One of the tricks that I use, and I always kind of have a snack on me. I always have something on me throughout workouts because our days are long, and I've learned how to manage it better this year than last. But one of the tips I have is just keeping Starburst in your pocket.
Starbursts?
Starburst.
Nice. Which flavor?
I think tastes the best, but you gotta go through the whole pack at some point.
Yeah.
But like a pack of Starburst is 50 carbs and whatever it is. They're not heavy to carry. It's something like that where you can just quick pop. It's kind of like chewing gum, but you swallow it, and it doesn't really take much time. It's just one of those things that juicy has a lot of sugar and it'll help out. But there are a bunch of things like that people use. That was the best tip that somebody gave me. It's just little things like that: apple juice, applesauce, those kind of things that are lightweight. It's definitely different. It's kind of annoying that you have to do those things sometimes, but it is what it is.
So how do you move between the difference of being obsessed with food and resting in peace?
That's a great question because there has been and there will continue to be periods of time where I need to gain weight and I need to have 4,300 calories a day. Like I have to count them and I have to go through that. Over the last couple of months, I've put all those pounds I've lost back on and then some, which has been super healthy. So I met with a nutritionist a couple weeks ago and we were just talking about my diet in general. And I'm really good at following a lot of things, but I needed to add a couple more aspects that I had lost. I kind of gave up on a lot of fruits because they can get kind of funky with blood sugar. So while I have time to experiment now, like we're on break, we're not practicing right now.
Yeah.
I can throw fruits back in and kind of figure out what the patterns are with them and kind of figure out how that positively or negatively impacts me. So
when you say patterns, talk about that. Tell me about the patterns that you're seeing.
So I use an app called Dexcom. It's very helpful to a lot of diabetics. It tracks your glucose and monitors it for every minute of every day. It reports on a 5-minute basis and it shows you a literal chart. Mine goes to my phone. And then there's an app for that called Clarity. It's associated with that company, Dexcom. And it shows you your patterns over 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, 2 weeks, whatever you need to see. So I'll take those charts and kind of configure them throughout the days and figure out, if I had this kind of meal on this day before this activity, should I do that again? Should I change something? Should I have more insulin? Should I have less insulin? Like, how did I hold up over this 4-hour period that I was on the field doing this and all these different activities? So when I can kind of configure what meals work and what meals don't, then that's just what I work in. But I also have to apply it to, strategic dieting with what I'm trying to do and what my goals are. So it took me a while to kind of understand all that stuff. A lot of people just kind of say, you know what, I'm not dealing with it. Like for me, cereal for me, like it's so nasty with what it can do. Some days it hits you really high. Some days it doesn't hit you at all. Like I just say, screw it. I'm cutting it out. It's not that healthy anyway. I don't need it. Cereal, I'm good on. But if I want to put peanut butter on waffles or, mix different things up to be effective, then I can figure that out too.
So peanut butter on waffles sounds weird. I'm just saying.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that
but
again.
Talk to me about that because you said, so if I want to put peanut butter on waffles to get that combination, so that means you're being strategic with what you're putting in so that you can double in your program.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So one of the things I was recommended was trying to figure out what portions of grams of carbs and proteins to have with every meal. So instead of having a protein shake, which is liquid, it absorbs faster, it can impact your blood sugar quicker and fall faster and all the rest. Peanut butter on waffles is that same amount of protein source, but you're just replacing what you would use as regular butter for that protein source. So it's one of those things where it'll absorb slower, it'll last longer through the day, it'll help you through workouts. So it's not sexy, it's not ideal, it's not something that people do, but it's one of those things where it'll help me with weight gain, it'll help me with workouts, and it'll help me with my blood sugar. So the alternative beats, all the other options that are more volatile.
Okay, so do you have more weird combinations that could be insightful for other people?
That's a good question.
Because peanut butter waffles is weird.
Yeah, I don't go too far off the map. I love chicken salad, tuna salad on sandwiches. I think that's super helpful.
Yeah.
All those kind of mixes, that's a good source of a lot of food.
And so, you don't mind. So this is nothing to do with like gluten and dairy, none of that. It's literally carb and protein.
Yeah. Yep.
And what kind of fruits can you not eat?
Bananas are super sugary. It's just the way that carbs work is that some of them release fast and some of them release slow.
Yes.
And just as quickly as they release fast, they also drop just as fast when you go to work out or when you go to do activities or when insulin takes over. But I've kind of learned to manage. I prefer melons, I think, even though they're sweeter, they're more easy to manage. Just when I stay generally active, my body kind of takes care of itself for the most part.
I mean, tiredness is a problem, right?
Yes. Yeah.
With your your high level activity, how do you manage the exhaustion that happens?
That's a good question too, because a lot of times after workouts, what happens is, your blood sugar will drop during a workout and then you'll stop, you'll become inactive and it'll rise up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So typically when people would eat after a workout, it's to, re-energize, to feel better, to refuel. And when you have that period of you stop working out, your blood sugar starts to rise again, it's not necessarily the best time to eat, if that makes sense, because it's already rising from the workout being complete, and then you're going to add a food to it, and it's going to keep going even more. So I have to be strategic about what I kind of cover after I work out, so I can find a way to have an appropriate insulin to carb ratio when I'm done, so I am able to refuel, I'm able to re-energize. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't get tired. I'm just going to sit here and say that refueling and rest and sleep are a big deal. Just as you have to be active, you also have to take that time off to refocus and to recenter. So, amount of sleep, hydration, water is a huge, huge deal. The more water you drink, the more sugar in your blood you can kind of filtrate through. That's a great neutralizer on its own without having to take insulin, without having to exercise. Just a lot of water intake is really, really good for the system.
How much water do you drink a day?
I try to do a gallon. I don't always meet it, but I try to get to a gallon. I'll stop at a gas station and pick up a gallon of water and see if I can get through it for the day and refill it for a couple of weeks and see if that's what I can do. It's important to me because it helps manage itself in a sense. Sometimes if I go a little high and I don't need to cover it with insulin, I'll just try to drink a lot of water and see if I can filter it out on its own.
Well, and that's the hard part because, like you said, after a workout, people want to eat. That's kind of the thing. Right. And you're saying no, because what happens is everything starts to rise. And if you eat, you can't control. How long after a workout do you usually know?
It's probably within 30 minutes is when you can kind of tell. I try to schedule my workouts at a time where I'll do them in the afternoon. So right when I finish, I can cover for lunch, and that'll be my post-workout snack and my lunch, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So if that takes a later breakfast or earlier dinner or whatever that is, then that's just how I kind of have to adapt. So that's how I prefer to do it, and I think it's easiest that way. But in a pinch, you just kind of cover a little bit after you work out and you have a little bit of what you can. But it's hard to read off the bat right when you get finished your workout because you don't really know if it's going to keep going down or if it's going to stop and go up. Right.
And what kind of pump do you have? Is there different kinds?
I don't wear a pump. I go straight injection.
Okay. Why do you do that?
Just because it would get in the way of playing. I'll probably use a pump when my career is over, whenever that may be.
Okay.
But for right now, it's just injection. It's not the most convenient, but just as effective. So
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the things that you have on your website, thesuper8.blog.
Yep.
And you have on there, you have sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
character, and discipline. And I want to talk about those things because what does that mean to you? So why do you talk about sacrifice and what is the significance there?
Yeah, so I'll go back to how it originated, if that's okay. We can go all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So while I was at school, it was my first year of college, and I don't go to that university anymore. It was January, and I kind of thought to myself, there's only a certain amount of people that are student athletes at a Division I level, and there's a certain percentage of people that are type 1 diabetics, and there's a certain percentage of people that are Catholic, and a certain percentage of people that are nephews and grandsons and sons and all the rest. So then I kind of figured when you take all those things and combine them, like that's me, but how many of me are there really? Like those percentages are so slim that when you combine all of them, who else has my perspective? Who else has my experience, you know? So then I kind of figured, you know, I have perspective, I have stories, I have events that I've lived through, but I don't have an overlying theme. I don't have something that ties them all together. So I was number 8 at Radford University, which is where I played my first year of ball. And I just kind of figured, you know, how can I take 8? How can I take these things? How can I apply it all together? So those 8 values that I have, I believe, are the best things that you can follow to be the best at whatever you are, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're a blogger, whether you're a son, you know, no matter what you are, those are the 8 values that tie all those aspects of your life together. Because there are so many websites and podcasts for diabetics, and then there are some for athletes, and then there are some for parenthood, and then there are all these different things. Well, why can't they all be the same? You know, we're not only one identity.
No.
We are so many things within ourselves. So those 8 values, God, faith, prayer, family, education, sacrifice, character, and discipline, are the ones that I believe you have to tap into to be the best at whatever that portion of your identity is. So that's the one thing that ties my life together as an entirety, being the minority in so many different aspects. And I think that can apply to anybody in whatever they go through. So that's kind of how I got the idea. Combined with the trying to break the social media mold, because I'm not a fan of the likes counting and the.
I know, me either. It's like, it's just.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So I figured, you know, if I can start something that people care enough to go out of their way to look at, then that's pretty cool. You know, I don't care how many people look at it. I don't care how many people, you know, take messages away from it. If it's one person, then I feel fulfilled. But it's stuck. It's stuck, and it's become something bigger than that. And, you know, I'm not doing it for money or for fame or any of that stuff. It's just something that I put out there. And people have loved it. People have enjoyed it. And I'll keep going with it because, you know, I've come to like it too. It reminds me of how I can be myself when I'm up or down, you know?
That's interesting because that's really my message. And I'm like 25 years older than you. You know, that's really cool because, you know, I get what you're saying. And there's something that's so important about bringing you to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Like who you are isn't just diabetic. It's not just family. It's not just, you know, an athlete. It's all of it. You go in and out of all of those roles that you play every day, every hour. And when you can understand that, then you can tap into something that's magical. And I think that's really what you've done here. Talk to me about character. What does that have to do with it?
Yeah, so the biggest message I kind of have about character, and I try to apply it to myself, is just to be consistent.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that I kind of see in the world really is that people are so quick to be extraordinarily happy when things are going well, and they're so quick to be extraordinarily sad when things aren't. And, you know, when there are successful people in the world, whether you like it or not, there are always going to be people that don't want to see you be successful. There just are. That's just the nature of the beast. So the way I look at it is when you're up and when you're high, when you're feeling good and when you've done all the right things that day, just mellow it out. Just stay consistent. And when you're down and when you're having a tough time, just raise yourself up a little bit and just stay consistent. So when you're on that line, people can't tell when you're down. People can't tell when you're up, because when you're not as up and we're not as high, people know, inversely. So it's one of those things where consistency is the key, and just remaining kind of who you are throughout. And obviously there are going to be people, they're going to be, your parents, your family members, the people in your close circles that you can certainly share those emotions with. When you walk out every day, keep the same smile, keep the same sense of joy, keep the same, confidence. And that is what your character is in everything that you do. If my blood sugar is messed up one day, I can't let that affect my at-bats. I can't let that affect, how I treat my brother. It's all those kind of things where, you just got to kind of handle it. And people kind of know me for being a little bit stoic here and then. I'm kind of hard to read sometimes, but that's just because that's the only way I can stay afloat in being who I am and in keeping that character consistent.
Well, you said something like when you're excited, mellow it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're sad, raise it up.
Yep.
And I think that's a really strong admonishment to people, because life has a way of, if you just keep reinforcing what the reality is, say you're having relational issues or you're struggling. Maybe, like for you, this is a real everyday thing that you deal with, and your mindset, this, being a high level athlete, your mindset is the key. And this is why you say this. This is not because you have this really great idea of what this should be. No, you live this every day, because if you get in your head, then you're not going to be the best you can be. And you have a responsibility not only to yourself, but you have a responsibility to God and to your family and to your team and to the people that got you where you got to. So that would be another level of what I hear you saying. And it is really like so you're going to be 20.
Yeah.
That's a really old thing to say.
Yeah, I keep hearing it. People keep telling me I'm mature beyond my years, and I appreciate that, and I've started to hear a lot more frequently. But it's just one of those things where I've been guided down the right path, I think, and I've been.
But what has guided you? What's been the guide?
Mostly my parents, pretty much every day. I'm super observant. I'm really good at kind of staying in the moment and kind of taking things for what they are.
Yep.
But they've been great examples that, I always believe that your parents should be your role models, for good or for bad, because they're the people that you're with every day. Sports figures and actors and actresses and whoever shouldn't be your role models, because when it comes down to it, you don't know who they are every day.
Right.
But with your parents, you do, and they've taught me a lot of things. A lot of things I think and beliefs kind of stem from them. And a lot of our long conversations through youth and all the rest. So they've been fantastic, and they've kind of been my guide. They, are great examples, and that is what I have continued and will continue to follow. And I'm just thankful that I've kind of learned so many things from them, and that I've been able to put my own spin on them through my own experiences and
Sure.
kind of project that to people.
But you've internalized it, right? So
yes.
Like in the simple nuance of what you said early on in our interview, where you said, well, my mom and dad really encouraged me to do this on my own. It sounds like that's their parenting style, where they will lead you, they will stand beside you, but you really need to learn how to. Because if you don't know how to, then you don't know how.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So the internalization of all that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of that I can think of. I mean, my dad grew up here. Both my parents grew up here, but my dad grew up here. He went to college here, and now he lives here.
Yeah.
So when we're out and about, in town as kids, we always see people that dad knew. Yeah. Oh, there's another guy that dad knows. Okay, but the challenge for us became, now we got to talk to him. Now we have to make that. Now we have to make that connection. We have to shake their hand. We have to look them in the eye, and we have to have a mature conversation with this person, because he's a person that we know. And it became that frequently. Another example is, we would go on road trips, and one time I forgot my toothbrush, and I'd have to go down as an 8-year-old to the front desk and say, may I have a toothbrush, please? My parents weren't going to be the ones to do that. They were going to teach us how to do that, and then they were going to say, go do it.
Right.
And that kind of became the way that I learned a lot of things was, I've seen them do it. I've seen their lessons. I've listened to their lessons, and now I have to exemplify it. And then when I became an independent entity and when I started to live on my own, those are still things that I carry with me.
Yeah.
And those are some of the things that have helped me, I guess, mature faster than some of my other peers.
Yep. Well, and something like this, that you have to grow up pretty fast when you have something that you cannot just slip into the stereotypical college student that just doesn't really take care of themselves, right?
Exactly.
Like the eating fast food and staying up to all hours and all of those things. It isn't really what you can do, and that's hard sometimes.
Yeah, I mean that's what the sacrifice of it is, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why that word's so important to me too. You kind of get thrown into the fire at a certain point as an athlete. When you're young, there's always a kind of an end goal, and some are good enough to reach it. Some of them aren't. But when you get to a certain point in your life, you kind of got to decide, like, do I want to be a high school student, or do I want to travel everywhere every weekend and play ball in front of scouts and all the rest to go play in college?
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that you have to just voluntarily miss out on. And after a certain point, that becomes a lifestyle, and then sacrifice, I guess, kind of becomes second nature.
It's the discipline of going, I want this. I'm
Right.
going to get it. And there's so many people out there like that are your age that get the vision, or they have the creative inspiration, or they have that business idea, and they just can't go forward. What would you say to that woman or man that's your age who is like, they need more discipline? How would you encourage them?
I think a lot of things that people my age struggle with, and I think it's just the way that the world is that there's such a sense of instant gratification.
I know.
I do an action and I want to see the result right away because that's how it is everywhere else. I turn in my online test, I get my grade. I post my picture, I get my likes. But you have to have a sense of process somewhere in there. And it's not going to hit right away. It's not going to be what you want it to be right away. And I think that holds people back. That scares people because there's a lot of unknown in that element. Even though when you're acting on a gut feeling, and when you're acting on something that you believe is right, you have to truly believe that it's right enough to stick with it when you don't feel like it's right anymore. And if people don't have that experience or have that understanding, then it's super easy to say, you know what, I can do something else, or I can just go be like everybody else. So there are a lot of aspects of, especially college life, especially when you find your own, when you're finally independent, where, you have these beliefs, you have these feelings, but if everybody else doesn't, then you don't feel supported and you're easily going to give up on that opportunity.
Well, and you don't have that luxury, because it's so interesting to me is what you're saying. I can see the experience that being a type 1 diabetic has brought you, and the maturity and the wisdom that you've allowed it to bring forward. A lot of people are sad that this is their life.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know anyone that has type 1 diabetes? Like, is there anyone else that you are, friends with, that you can share with? Or does it feel like to you, no, I'm the only one right now?
I have a personal trainer that is type 1. I've had two teammates, and a classmate or two that I've been acquaintances with that have it as well. I'll talk to them if they have questions, but I'm never really one to volunteer.
No.
I have a couple extended family members, a couple aunts that are nurses, and they all obviously have information. But one of the biggest things that they've told me is that every case is different. Even when people come into the hospital and they have their experiences, the hospital to an extent still has to learn from the patient because everybody's body reacts differently. So while what works for me is great, so I do have some conversations about some things, especially, medical supplies. If something I have works and I like it, then I can certainly recommend that. But when it comes down to the routine, everybody's so different in the fact that, it's tough to give somebody advice when there's a good chance you're probably wrong.
There's not like a lot of wiggle room either. Like
Right.
If you're given advice because you're going to run that 5K and that person's walking, that's a very big difference. And,
Right.
And I appreciate that. That's wisdom too, right? How has your faith played a role in this?
That's a great question. And the faith dynamic of life, I think, scares people, especially today. You know, the whole God, faith, prayer kind of trio there at the front. People don't always understand. And the best thing that I tried to do was make it universal. Just, you know, God's the concept that there's a greater power, whether that be you believe things are what they are, or there's just something above you that you can't control everything. That's really what it comes down to. Whether you go to church or whether you go to the synagogue or no matter what you do, it's just the belief somewhere in life that you don't have full control, that you can back up and say, I don't have full control. Just as prayer is positive self-talk, whether that be you asking for something, whether that be you complimenting somebody else, you know, all those things are a sense of prayer, in that they're just things to express, verbally or non-verbally, that give you reassurance or are positive. And the same way that faith is hope or desire or wishes that you work towards. So obviously I have my Christian and Catholic beliefs on what those things actually are, but you can still universalize those words into other things. So faith playing a role in this has just been hope. It's been desires in goals that you set, and then it's the way to get there. And it's just the feeling of this isn't my fault. This is not out of my control. I never had a why me moment. You know, it's just trusting that things are what they are, and I have to react to them how I have to react to them. I can't control all these variables. So that's where my sense of faith comes from in my journey, in that, I do have beliefs that I can crack a Bible open and tell you about faith, but you can also live it in the sense that it's not written word, in the sense that it's actual experiences, and some things are out of your control. And how the world handles itself that you can't control, leading you to your goal, that is ultimately what faith kind of is.
Like, we should just drop the mic right there. That's like, I love what you just said. I love it. That is prayer is positive self-talk.
But those are scary terms. I mean, people.
Because prayer is scary, right? Like, because people see prayer as this asking.
Mm-hmm. I think the way that prayer kind of unfolds itself is in the way that it's just kind of an expression of just goodness, you know?
Absolutely.
It's a conversation that helps with that consistency, whether you're having that conversation with yourself, whether you're having that conversation with somebody else. It kind of keeps you grounded.
It's gratitude, right? There's a position of it absolutely. That is based in that gratitude. And what I've learned over my years is prayer is really the position of a thankfulness, a gratitude, an understanding that we are in cooperation with the world, with each other. We're not fighting. We're not, against one another. We are in a stance of, wow. And when we can be there, that actually changes the situation. Like you said, you go from, if you're sad, it raises you. It raises you because you're speaking something out that is out of a position of gratitude. So if you don't have something, you're asking, but if you can actually pull that back a little bit and instead of saying, I really need this to happen, you be grateful for what you have, and your spirit rises. I think that's a really important point.
Yep, absolutely.
So why are you sharing your story now?
I didn't experience the tougher parts of it until later on. Obviously, mm-hmm. I had to go through a phase that it eventually hit me pretty hard. I got a lot of questions. I got a lot of people that kind of ask things about all aspects of my life. What does it take to be a Division I athlete? How do you manage this? How do you manage that? So I realized that I was just telling the same stories, it felt like, consistently. And I kind of realized, I might as well just make it into a platform. And if people are that curious and people, are yearning for that information, then it's out there.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to share that perspective of it, but it's kind of come down for me as learning other people's perspective as much as I share it. So just as people, struggle with their questions and struggle with their things, we all do. Yeah. I just want to make sure that I can put my story out so that people can kind of take comfort in that and learn from that, in all aspects of anything, because, you can be one thing that somebody's not and still learn from their experiences. I fully believe that because those 8 values do transpire to anything.
They sure do. And they're really the core of a lot of our lives.
Exactly.
You know, it just, you might maybe not feel like you're strong in some of them, but they are a part of who we all are.
Yes.
What would you say as we close? How would you encourage someone who finds himself in a situation like you were 2 years ago? How would you give them a word of wisdom or encouragement?
I would probably say, I would start with that it's not your fault. I would start with that there's nothing to regret. The other thing I would probably say is just be open to any information that you can get. Just learn as much as possible. A lot of people I know tend to get lazy with it, and they tend to not give their all to it. And that's tough too, because it makes it harder. The lazier you get, the more work you kind of create for yourself on the back end. And if you can be proactive and you can, put it behind you and realize that it's not your fault, that you will have times where you ask, why me? And you will have times where you wonder why this happened to you, as your family will too. But there's nothing that you can do to change it at this point. So you got to change your perspective somehow, and you got to keep rolling because, I heard it when I was diagnosed and I never believed it, but I can't remember the time before 2 years ago when I could just eat all day and not have to take care of me.
You never remember the time you could eat all the cake and sample it all?
Exactly. Yeah, just because there's such a routine about it, and when it becomes second nature, you kind of get more peace. So for anybody that kind of is starting with it or they're starting to go through it, just keep with it and start with a good routine so that it just becomes second nature and that you can rely on that.
And what would you say to someone who has been diagnosed with type 1 and they feel like their dreams of being a high-level athlete are over?
I don't think that's a realistic thought. People have those thoughts, certainly. And
they do.
It's not just being an athlete. It can be anything, and it does get frustrating. It does get a little weird sometimes, I remember one of the first practices back after I was playing for the first time in the spring with it. We had some activity or some exercise, and my blood sugar went low, and I had to, take a seat. And that's a weird, ostracizing, bizarre feeling. And when you're a leader, when you're somebody who's influential, that's the first time you kind of feel like you're less than. And it's tough to swallow that pill sometimes. So as the short-term things happen and as the struggles happen, still got to remember that there's a long-term in it. And the quicker that you find out that there's a routine and the quicker that you have something to rely on, then the easier it becomes in the long term to help propel. Just because there might be a step back or two, it doesn't mean that you can't keep going in the long run. You just got to be observant, you got to learn, and you got to keep going.
Do you have anxiety about it though? Like managing and kind of like, what's going to happen if I do this? It worked that time, but what if I actually do this and it doesn't work?
I'll be honest with you, and it is a mega blessing, and I am not sure how I've navigated without it, but I don't get anxious about a lot of things. There are a lot of thoughts that you have, what if, especially with management, but at the end of the day, like, I'm so proactive about it that if things do go wrong, like, I can almost overreact, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. It does make sense because I was talking to this is so interesting to me because when I was talking to Nathan, he said almost the same thing. But then there was one individual I spoke to that was very, very anxious and just really struggling with how come? Like my life, now I am the other. Like I can't go out to parties. I can't have that drink. I can't, it's all of that. And like you said, it's this proactive understanding that you can live a normal life if you just stay consistent.
Yeah. And I think like for Nathan and I, it certainly sounds like because it was so much later in life that we kind of handled it on our own. I'm sure that there are parents out there that have to take care of young children, and because that's out of your control and you don't follow that as closely as someone who's older does, I'm sure that there are many, many high anxieties in those scenarios.
Yeah.
But just because I've been older, I have a good understanding of how everything works. I have a good understanding of what affects my body in what ways.
Yep.
With food and with workouts, that I don't worry about too much. And if I do have a mishap or a mistake or a letdown, it's only like between me and me. If that makes sense. Yep. I can't be mad at my parents, and my parents can't feel guilty or vice versa, because that's what
you didn't do it. You missed a cue somewhere along the line. Yeah, you made a choice, right?
Yeah, and I have no problem with fixing that or all the rest, but I can certainly imagine how a parent could feel if they made a slip up or all the rest, and there's a certain level of misunderstanding there, especially with young kids. So I do get that anxiety part of it, and I can't directly relate to it, but. Well, on my end, it's more independent.
The woman I spoke to with her son, she said, you give them too much insulin. Like if she didn't know, but if he ate fishy crackers and she wasn't, or he didn't eat his lunch, then how would she know?
Exactly.
Right. So it's teaching a small child how to manage that. The anxiety is really on the parent at that point. It's not really with the child, because they don't know any different. Whereas for you learned very early on, this is my thing. This is my gig. I gotta manage it. I love this conversation. I'm in the boat where, with a lot of people probably that know you, that say, wow, you're a great person. You're a leader. I can see it. And you're going to do some great things in this world. And I love that you are willing to share your story. This is one of the reasons why I do the show, is because I believe that when someone shares like you've done, it offers other people hope. And they can believe that, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. Like, I know now that I can have some possibilities. So what you've done here is you've sparked hope in someone and created a path of possibility, maybe where they weren't seeing it before. And that, you can't put a price tag on that. And it doesn't matter who it is. If it's one person, amazing. You've had an impact. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me too, because outlets are important. If I have a story and no outlet, then it doesn't really matter that much. And the other thing I'll say is, a little shameless plug. Again, it's thesuper8.blog. I have a contact page on there too. So if anybody ever has any questions or wants to reach out, feel free. And then my social media pages are at BAFreddy26 on Instagram and at BFreddy14 on Twitter. I'm not big enough to not reply to anybody. So any questions or information or all the rest, I certainly will give a look to and hopefully be able to help out.
Awesome. And if there's anyone that wants to share their story, you can weigh in on my show. I love it. So thank you so much for giving your time.
Absolutely.
This is awesome. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.